Chapter 91 to 93. Tap, tap, tap. The Hokage's eyes fluttered groggily open after he pulled yet another all-nighter, trying to deduce the plans of the other Kages and form his own. Tap, tap, tap. It was a grueling task, but such was war. And this one was inevitable. Tap, tap, tap. His mood plummeted down as his ears were assaulted by the unceasing tapping noise that woke him up. He was tired, irritated, and not feeling in a mood for jokes. He abruptly straightened and shouted at whoever dared to disrupt his rest. Shut the fuck up. His face was morphed into an angry scowl that would send a lesser man running for his life, but Hiruzen froze when he saw Tsunade in front of him. Her eyebrow was twitching as her feet stopped tapping the floor, scowl forming on her face. He could see a faint outline of chakra form on her fist, making him gulp. Gotta change the topic fast. Hiruzen mentally shrieked, and outwardly, his lips bloomed into a pleasant grandfatherly smile. Ah, Tsunade-cha. He stopped mid-word when Tsunade narrowed her eyes and cleverly corrected himself. San. What brings you here? Hiruzen swept the room with his eyes as he wondered where his ANBU guards were. He doubted they wouldn't jump at Tsunade the second they saw the chakra outline forming on her fist, but surprisingly, no one tried. It was then his gaze turned to a deadpan one as he saw 4 bruised bodies in the corner of the room. Hiruzen quickly recognized them as his ANBU guards. Are they too old for this shit? Maybe I should pick younger guards. Hiruzen mused. Cut the crap, sensei. I came to help Konoha in the upcoming war. Tsunade said, and Hiruzen's expression lit up, already thinking where to deploy her when she completely dashed his hope. I will only help out in the hospital though. Don't count on me fighting. Tsunade said as she uncaringly flopped into the chair for guests and started inspecting her nails. Hiruzen's eyebrows furrowed. Tsunade, as a ninja of Konoha you have to listen to the Hokage. If I order you to lead a unit, you will lead the unit. He sternly spoke, but Tsunade just rolled her eyes at him in dismissal. And if I don't? She asked lazily, making Hiruzen almost have a heart attack. His hunch was telling him he would regret taking a forceful approach, but despite it, he decided to utter his next sentence. He was still too used to obedient Tsunade he remembered from years ago. Then you will be labeled a nuke nin. He said with a severe expression, but contrary to his expectations, Tsunade was as laid back as before, still minding her nails more than him. Then I will be labeled a nuke nin. If Konoha doesn't need me, I will be going. She shrugged with a hint of amusement on her face and started standing up, only for Hiruzen to stare at her in utter bewilderment with his mouth wide open, not comprehending what just happened. It was when Tsunade was already walking towards the door his mind turned blank, and only with his long experience of being Kage did he resist the urge to groan. I am too old for this shit. Tsunade stepped through the front door of the hospital and was instantly greeted by a black missile impacting her chest. She raised her eyebrow when she realized it was Shizen. Master. Shizen was hugging Tsunade and the people started whispering. Tsunade was sure there would be some pretty steamy rumors flowing tomorrow. This was Konoha, after all. I missed you. Shizen beamed as she arched her head to get a proper look at Tsunade, and her eyes teared up. I thought I would never see you since you were sick. The corner of Tsunade's mouth twitched as she remembered how smothering her apprentice was, and she could only sigh as she started patting her head. Well, apparently not. She shrugged. Not like it wasn't a close call. Her voice was loud enough that the entire hall of the hospital heard it, stopping in their tracks, wondering what kind of sickness could almost kill the best medic in the world. Shuddering thoughts. Anyway. Tsunade's expression turned awkward. I am here to dash, she started, but Shizen interrupted her by pinning the badge of the head of hospital on her haori. Yes, we know, master. Shizen said with a gentle smile, and Tsunade couldn't help but feel extremely proud of herself while thinking. I raised her so well. The news about Tsunade Senju returning to Konoha spread through the village in a heartbeat. While most villagers happily celebrated, in the council room the mood was somber. Hiruzen, what do you mean she refused to be a commander? Danzo asked stoically, and his cheek slightly twitched, but most people inside knew that simple gesture showed just how irritated he was. Exactly as I said. The third Hokage's shoulders slumped. She wasn't even deterred by becoming a nuke nin. The entire room quieted down when they heard this. There was a reason why she was allowed to roam free, or why she could just say, fuck, Konoha, and have no repercussions as long as she didn't work against Konoha itself. It wasn't her status as the last of the founding clan. Tsunade was one of their heroes of the Second War. Her popularity was enormous even now, a decade after the event. Hiruzen nor the council would ever let her roam free if they could help it. She was the best medic in the world. Her value was enormous. In some ways, Hiruzen would admit her to be more important than even himself. It was her knowledge about poisons that single-handedly won them the Suna/Konoha front in the Second War. The situation with Tsunade was too problematic. If they labeled her as Nuke Nin, every single village would fight and promise whatever she wanted only for her to join them. That had to be avoided, hence, she was given permission to go on her vacation after the Second War. Not to say, if one of the Sannin suddenly became a Nuke Nin, it would create a much bigger problem than just having a strong ninja on the run. The counselors could only grit their teeth when they imagined the political shitstorm and public unrest that would start if one of their legends did something like this. Even daimyo could become involved, and their shady deals would be much, much harder to conceal. Fortunately, she decided to take her spot as the head of the hospital back and is currently cleaning up the place. Hiruzen tried to make the mood better. It was then the door swung open as a body of Anbu flew straight through them, skidding on the floor all the way in front of the table. Tsunade walked in as if nothing happened, making the political leaders of Konoha inside flabbergasted. Only the Uchiha Patriarch was enraged enough to react. Senju. What is the meaning of this? He shouted, but Tsunade just ignored him and sat in a chair. Hiruzen's eyes widened. Tsunade just sat into the chair belonging to the head of the Senju clan, which meant, I am the last Senju, Uchiwawa. That obviously makes me the head of my clan. Tsunade rolled her eyes at the arrogant prick and started reading a book, completely ignoring the people around her. When the silence didn't cease even after 3 minutes, Tsunade let out an annoyed sigh and raised her head to look at the third Hokage. Feel free to continue. She told him in deadpan, finally snapping him out of it. The meeting, awkwardly continued. Well, infiltration success, I guess. The war started and the fights were intensifying by the day. Ray had many reports from his spies/merchants about happenings and various rumors that flooded the capital cities. From there, it wasn't really that hard to depict what was going on. He might not have a full account and surely many important events evaded the civilians who were spying for him, but then again, he didn't really need military secrets. Most of his intel was guesswork created through the recounting of purchases of various villages, but at least 70% was actually spot on. After all, a village couldn't really organize a military action without enough supplies, and his company was selling the best seals in the world. That's why Ray, Conan, and Mei, the newly dubbed Team Downpour, knew exactly what to expect on their first mission in this war. The Mizukage kept them in the village for the first 3 months as the conflict started escalating, and now, he deployed them as reinforcements to a remote region made of isles near the Land of Lightning, which held almost zero interest to the Land of Water or Kirigikure. Ray was frowning for the entire way, trying to discern what was the plan of the old grouch, but he was shooting blanks. He might not know what was the endgame, but for this mission, he had his guesses and he didn't like them at all. What's bothering you? Ray heard a voice calling out on him from behind. He didn't need to turn around to know who it was, after all, he trained her for years. Ringo. What are you doing here? Ray asked incredulously. The past 2 years, Ringo was avoiding him like a plague. Only with a heavy heart did he slowly accept her distancing herself from him, so he had no idea why she approached him now of all times. Shouldn't you be in the commander's tent? I don't know, commanding. Ringo chuckled at his question and sat next to him. Both were now sitting on the edge of the roof of a very high lighthouse on the main island of Nigori Isles, the place where the Mizukage apparently chose to make a forward base for the Kiri forces. Maybe. She nodded and leaned her head on Ray's shoulder, startling him. I am sorry. Ringo quietly said, gazing forward without turning to Ray despite feeling his eyes intently peering at her face. I started seeing things and ... She tried to push the emotion-filled words out of her but had quite a problem doing so as she clutched her hands. Ringo, are you high? Ray worriedly but bluntly asked in a deadpan tone. Not once during the years did the wild tomboy behave like a meek and bashful, nostalgic kitten. Something was clearly wrong. Ray narrowed his eyes at Ringo and added. You are clearly not drunk. Did you start smoking weed or something? You know you shouldn't do that during a war. Kusa is known for poisoning the weed they export during wartimes. He ranted, not paying attention to Ringo anymore as the words flew from his mouth, making her more and more exasperated by the second. Ray only stopped when Ringo took his cheeks into her hands, and suddenly, he could feel himself being pulled forward and his eyes widened as his lips landed on Ringo's. It was a gentle and awkward kiss. Ray's mind went blank when he felt her silky and soft lips, his heart beating hard from the surprise. Ringo pulled back with her cheeks dyed crimson and her brown eyes contently sparkling. Shut up. She said with utter happiness in her voice before her hands embraced Ray's torso and she put her head onto his chest. It took a few moments for Ray to snap out of it, and when he did, he saw the small cute woman tightly clutching him, which made him smile. Now I am certain you smoked something. He sighed jokingly, but his real feelings were conveyed by his hand that tenderly landed on Ringo's head, caressing her hair. Ray was smiling contently as he was staring into the horizon while feeling Ringo's warmth, but inwardly, his mind was in deep sadness knowing it wouldn't last as Ringo would not betray Kiri. As if feeling his distress, Ringo started talking. "The Mizukage doesn't trust us," she said out of nowhere in a quiet and sad tone. Ray raised an eyebrow at that because he would never expect these words to come out of her mouth. "Every S-rank shinobi of Kirigikure was given the rank of commander but you, me, and Conan," Ringo continued. "But you are the commander here," Ray said, but his face was now smirking in relief that Ringo finally started using her own brain instead of believing everything the Mizukage told her. Maybe she still could be persuaded to join the light side. Hearing him, Ringo rolled her eyes but didn't lift her forehead from his chest. "As if. I have 200 people in this base that is too far away from anywhere Kiri would be able to send reinforcements once the fighting begins. Moreover, these islands are only a few kilometers away from the coasts of the Land of Lightning. Well, the Team Downpour was called here because according to Kiri spies, this base here will be attacked," Ray said offhandedly while nodding. He knew her worries well and they were not unfounded. By now, they were bunkering down and waiting for Kumo troops to show up. "The problem is we have no idea how many and who Kumo will send," Ringo stated, her voice growing weaker and weaker. Ray could feel her shuffling her head and looked down, only to be greeted with big brown eyes of Ringo, looking at him with affection apparent inside of them. "If this goes south, I want you to run," Ringo said, tightening the hold on his torso. Ray softly smiled and pecked her nose. "Don't worry. Kumo will certainly send at the very least over 1,000 shinobi led by several S-rankers," he whispered calmingly. At first, Ringo calmed down due to his tone, but when her brain processed what he said. Ray however continued speaking with a smirk when he saw her eyes widening. "After all, a little birdie not belonging to Kiri whispered to me that the Kumo received a missile about our numbers and that 3 S-rank shinobi of Kiri are here, far from home, outnumbered, and outcunade." Ray added a bit of dramatic flair into his voice, shaking his head in mock disbelief. "Apparently the Mizukage's main goal is Kumo too. Who would have guessed?" He snorted. Ringo wasn't stupid. She knew tactics and strategy. She just preferred to disregard them most of the time. After all, she wasn't the type to lead troops. She was a fighter, not a leader. But even then she clearly understood the message Ray was giving her by being so sarcastic. "We are a bait," she said with realization apparent in her eyes but then stopped herself. "Wait, your flight." Ringo gulped, still in disbelief at what her mind was telling her. "Only Team Downpour has means of running away for sure. I have a 50-50 chance of survival depending on who Kumo will send. Even I can't fight an army alone." Ringo was biting her fingernail while droning on. "The 200 shinobi under my command were sent here to be slaughtered. Which would mean the end for your reputation in the village. Well, if you survive and get back to Kiri, that is." Ray shrugged, getting a gaping look from Ringo. "After all, you are the commander. It's your duty to call for retreat," he said and looked towards the sea with amusement. Despite the ability to walk on water, ninjas had to use boats for naval warfare. Clearly, the boats Ringo received to get here were not the fastest sort. "Son of a bitch," Ringo breathlessly stated. Yes, if she called for a retreat now, she would be regarded as a coward. If she called for a retreat mid-battle, her forces would be slaughtered due to slow boats. Not many if any would survive. This was one massive death trap and the only one who would easily dodge it was Ray's team. Oh. Ringo was hit with a realization and looked at their position. She was hugging Ray and he was returning the hug with head pats. The Mizukage is counting on you saving me, isn't he?" she plainly said with a dry tone. "Yes, that he clearly is. Having a ruined reputation doesn't mean your skill would drop. You would be still an S-rank and a very important killing tool for the village. Just look at how many people you assassinated already, making this war easier for Kiri. It would be only your influence in the village politics and respect of the village that would disappear." Ray told her. "A clever plan, indeed. But if we are the bait?" Ringo's brows furrowed and Ray eye smiled at her. Yup, the main goal of the Mizukage for this war was always Konoha. The spies of many countries are bringing home intel about Kiri attacking and focusing mainly on Kumo. After all, these islands are very close to their territory. And I bet the main force of Kiri already set sails towards Kumo. If the advance force, which we clearly are not but they don't know that, is 200 strong, the main army would be around a few thousand. Oh, Kumo will hit this place hard, of that, you can be sure. Ray shook his head. And because of that, Konoha will lower their guard. Ringo finished with a difficult expression. The Kiri force that set sails will turn midway towards the shores of the Land of Fire. Ringo bitterly stated before looking at Ray. What should I do, sensei? Ray was a bit bewildered she asked him this but appreciated her trust. He smirked as a plan was starting to form in his head. Well, since you asked so nicely, naturally we can't attack them head-on nor try to defend the base if they will outnumber us greatly. He tenderly smiled at Ringo and kissed her forehead, making her flustered as he leaned towards her ear and whispered. Let's do it like this. They are finally here. Ray said as he felt a few hundred people of varying strength through his nature sensing. This made the people surrounding him tense slightly, except Conan who just smiled and reassuringly squeezed Ray's hand. It was 3 days since his talk with Ringo and these days were quite busy and demanding for every single shinobi in the small Kiri force. Ray decided to fight like a shinobi and that's why he was now looking at the main base that was completely empty from a bit further away in an underground bunker made in a cliff. The Kiri troops were also scattered and hiding all around, a few meters away from the base that was supposed to be a bait. The Kiri shinobi were in 10-man squads and everyone already knew their role. There are around 500 people with civilian-level chakra reserves. Mercenaries most likely, cannon fodder, I suppose. Ray said with a frown. While these people weren't ninja, they shouldn't be underestimated despite them probably hardly having low genin level strength, if that. The important part was their numbers. Obviously, they were largely outnumbered. Then according to the chakra levels, there are around 200 genins, around 80 chunin, and 20 jonin for 300 shinobi. 300. Ringo repeated. 800 in total. She bit her lower lip, hoping their plan would work. Plus there are 2 incredibly strong chakras. Ray added. Probably commanders. I'd bet one of them is a Jinchuriki. A grin spread on Ray's lips as he said that. He was, after all, a bit of a Bija chakra collector as of right now. That's bothersome. Ringo stated seriously while narrowing her eyes to the horizon. Ray's sensing range was quite a lot and the enemies couldn't even be seen yet. Don't bother, Ray quipped in amusement when he saw her trying to spot them. Even with your incredible eyesight you won't see them yet. You would have to be a Hyuga for that. They are still on the other side of the island, getting out of their boats. Ringo nodded, understanding there will still be quite a bit of waiting involved before all hell breaks loose. She only hoped their enemies would fall for the ploy. What do you sense, B? A asked gruffly as he turned to his surrogate brother. B frowned as he watched the base of Kiri Ninja. At the very first glance, it was suspicious. There were no patrols, no traps, no nothing, and the base looked empty. It was only when B started using his chakra sensing he got a quite worrying surprise. There is no Yeti, it's totally empty. Broza. B rhymed while wildly gesturing with his hands, successfully creating a tick mark on A's forehead. Despite his silly action, inwardly B was in a discussion with his tenant about what was going on. He tried to increase the range or precision of his chakra senses and even let the 8 tails try but neither could sense anything human-like anywhere close. Ray was too experienced when it came to sensing and had the foresight to expect enemies to bring at least one sensor with them. He made sure that every hiding place of Kiri's 10-man squads had foolproof anti-chakra sensing seals. Unless B had a skill like Kurama's emotion sensing, he would be unable to feel the Kiri shinobi no matter how much he would try. Commander A. A barely 20 years old orange-haired woman with shoulder-long hair approached A. She at most reached his chest but the second he saw her, his face lit up. Looks like the enemy retreated. May I take some of our men to scout the base? She enthusiastically asked and he couldn't help but chuckle as he patted her head, making her lower her head with a pout from embarrassment and start muttering something suspiciously similar to a no baka. Yeah, L, feel free. Looks like the Kiri cowards ran. A boisterously laughed, making the woman smile at him tenderly. He would never allow his fiancée to do this if he didn't confirm there was no one nearby. After all, she was barely a mid-chunin. It took a lot of persuasions to make his father allow him to bed someone weak like her. Alas, he really loved the girl. L gathered the men, 5 jonin, 10 chunin, and 15 genins while the rest of her 100 were normal mercenaries. B was still watching the surroundings with a frown and furrowed eyebrows when L's men started to cautiously approach the base. He really didn't like the mist that was starting to rise all around. But the mist was natural and no chakra was in it so he had nothing he could say. An uncomfortable feeling however didn't leave him no matter what he did. All of the L troops heaved a sigh of relief when no trap sprang up nor any ambush happened when 10 minutes later they finally reached the door of the base. A and the rest of the army waited in the clearing, observing the situation. They saw L's men entering the base without any problem, making them inwardly happy. The mercenaries mostly cheered at the easy job, happy for being paid without fighting while the more experienced, mostly jonin, started to get a bit jumpy due to the ever so slowly rising mist around them. The only reason why they weren't on full alert was that it was confirmed the mist was natural. Ray smirked and released another batch of storage seals that had a natural mist from around Kirigikir stored inside. They are making this so easy. He heard Ringo snicker in wonder. Nope, it's just that ninjas use so much jutsu they forget the basics of stealth and covert ambush. Look at them, Ringo. Ray said seriously. Ringo quickly recognized the glint in Ray's eyes. It was the one he had every time he was giving her some important lesson when she was a genin. It was the glint she so loved on her sensei. It was the thing that made her less of a battle junkie. She lowered her head slightly in bashfulness and attentively listened to Ray. The second the mist appeared, their guard went up. But the second they confirmed the mist has no chakra in it and is natural, most of them stopped caring. Despite that, the more experienced ninjas are still tense. Ray revealed a devilish smile. And that will be their undoing. Oh, how much chaos that can cause. Ringo just shook her head. Sometimes I wonder where did you get such a nasty streak. As she said that, she gave Ray a stink eye. And you always admonished me for being too battle crazy. She huffed and crossed her arms in mock anger, making Conan and other people in their 10-man commander squad chuckle at her antics. Ray just ignored Ringo and turned to Kuga Mizura, a jonin who had a minor bloodline that could infuse her chakra into 2 sources of water, in this case water in a bowl, and connect them. Ray found it incredibly useful for sending messages without needing to reveal his communication seals, as the woman could basically form a text from the water, and due to the connection, the same text would be created in every hiding spot of Kiri Shinobi. The best and the most confusing part for Ray, no chakra was being transmitted to accomplish this, so chakra sensing would not spot it. Well then, Mizura, your turn. Ray gestured to the bowl, and the gentle-looking brunette revealed a bloodthirsty smile as her blue eyes sparkled in anticipation. She wasn't a hunter for no reason. He then glanced at Conan, giving her a silent order to prepare the start of the plan. Boom, here we are. It didn't take long, and the Kiri 10-man squad started to sneak through the natural mist towards the Kumo forces. Ray provided them sealing tags that could mask their chakra similarly to the ones inscribed to the hiding spots, but the second they used chakra, they would be revealed. It was solely for getting closer in the cover of the natural mist without being noticed. The commander squad was still in the hideout, observing and prepared to react if anything went downhill, while Ringo, Conan, and Ray were intently staring at A and B. It was obvious who would be in charge of distracting these two. It was 30 seconds later that A was watching his fiancée's troops entering the base as the visibility was slowly starting to drop to worrying levels. Bother, we should retreat. B suddenly said in a serious tone that was very unusual for him. Didn't you say you can't sense anything? A raised his eyebrow at B and crossed his arms. Yes. B trailed off, not in the mood to rap, which made her really nervous. But I just have this really bad feeling, Konoyero, Bakayero. A furrowed his eyebrows and tilted his head. A very bad feeling, huh? He nodded. Certainly. Despite the mist, it's not like his men had only B as a censor. They had 20 of them, which was a lot since there were only 300 shinobi. I requested them especially since he knew about Kirigikure no Jutsu and that good censor nin are best to counter it. But neither of his sensors were giving him a red alarm, meaning nobody sensed anything. Not in the mist, and certainly not in the surroundings. Yet, he still couldn't get the feeling of being watched out of his mind. I looked at B's worried expression, which was only masked by his black sunglasses, and curtly nodded. He would rather get scolded for not finishing what seemed like an incredibly easy mission properly in the earliest possible time due to regrouping of his troops than being ambushed. He decided to trust his instincts. Q. Take 10 fast men and go tell L that we are retreat dash. I didn't finish his sentence when a sudden but powerful boom reverberated through the island, making the wind violently rampage, dispersing the mist while also making the unprepared Kumo forces quite dazed due to the abrupt booming sound, followed by a strong force of the wind that impacted the troops. Some mercenaries were sent tumbling across the ground, but shinobi and only the more experienced mercenaries withstood the residual shockwaves, managing to keep standing. No. A's anguish-filled scream tore through the clearing as he realized what blew up when he looked at the burning rubble of what was previously the Kiri base. The explosion was so strong, even the guards stationed outside the already destroyed building were torn to shreds by it. Obviously, no one survived such an abrupt explosion. A dropped to his knees as his mind was swirling in the horrid realization that his fiancée just perished. He had no idea what to do when the distressed screams of rage and surprise of his troops filled the clearing. The real battle has just begun.